Hello, my name is Aleishia Lewis and I'm the Deputy Head at St Mary's Prittlewell Primary in Southend-on-Sea. I also work as a Moderation Manager for Southend Borough Council at both Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. I work as an SLE for SETSA, which is the South Essex Teaching School Alliance, and I'm also the BAME-Ed East Rep, most notably for South Essex. And today I'm here to talk to you about two things very close to my heart, which are identity and diversity, and really focusing on the reality that we need to create a curriculum that our children need. So here we are at the start, kind of a week into a second national lockdown. And I have to admit, for myself and my family, my own children, I have three sons, to get their head around COVID during the first lockdown rather, and could almost understand, okay, this is happening, so we need to stay home. We need to do school at home. We can't go out all the time. They can get their heads around that. This, they couldn't get their head around. The murder of George Floyd is something that really rocked my eldest child in particular. He sat down with me and he asked the question of, would this happen to my brothers? Because he knows that whilst he is very light-skinned with the giant blonde afro, his brothers are much darker than him. The reality is I couldn't tell him no. I couldn't tell him that his brothers would never be stopped by the police, because I remember being stopped by the police as a child, with my mother being stopped, driving home with me and my sister in the car, and being repeatedly asked where she was going, with the policeman not content with the fact that she was saying she was going home, because the assumption was there that a black woman could not live in Southend. Well, where are you going? I'm going home, was a question that was asked repeatedly. Now we are again in another situation where we are looking at the question of equality, the questions of diversity, and everything that comes around it. Because here is something that was brought up just last week in the media. The fact that last week, when Capital City was being stormed by those protesters, they were just let in. And yet there on the right is a picture of the military, the police officers that were brought in to protect the Capitol building against a Black Lives Matter march. Now those marches were all peaceful. They were all dealt with in peace. But yet there was not that sight of military, of the armed forces, of any police stopping those demonstrators last week who were just let on in. The question there comes again. A Black Lives Matter march and everybody is out in force. The same for white protesters, nothing. This is the reality. So what needs to happen? The honest truth is our curriculum needs decolonising and diversifying. We need to get our children, our staff and our parents to talk about identity, race and racism. The uncomfortable conversations that have not actually ever taken place need to happen. We're in this situation now because people don't actually want to talk about it. And before we get comfortable, we need to get uncomfortable. The time to reflect and make a change is here. George Floyd, that whole situation started a ball rolling. It started a momentum, and that the momentum is here. We need to capture it and harness it. And we need a curriculum that reflects all of our pupils to enable them all to achieve. Now, the NEU did some brilliant webinars during the last lockdown, and they are all available on YouTube if you'd like to see them. During one of them, one of the speakers said this, and it really struck a chord with me, because it is true. Our education system was broken before, and then COVID smashed it completely. We have to build it back together in a way that creates effective change, and we need to do that collectively. We need to work together to build our education system back, because so much of it is broken in all different facets. But when we're building it back, we have to make sure that we are creating that change. Now, I'm going to be really honest. A lot of people think that they can diversify the curriculum just by putting up some posters, adding a few more people in, and we're done with. The reality is that is only part of the work. And if that's all that you do as a school towards this, then you will not get very far. Because the true work that has to come from this, the true work that needs to take place is the work on anti-racism. And there are people, good-meaning people, who say, I don't see colour. The reality is everybody needs to. It's important to see and acknowledge that our pupils are different. It's important that we understand that, and that by not actively seeing their race or their skin colour, of their pupils, of your families, you're denying them their history. You're denying them of their racial and their ethnic background, and you're trying to make them fit in the same box an imaginary box, but the same box as others. Now, all these things are concepts that are explored in this book here by Tiffany Jewell. It is written for young adults, but that makes it very easy and very accessible. And it does a lot of the work on language, because that can be something that people see as a real barrier to having these conversations, is they are very unsure about what to say and what not to say and what will offend and all those things. But actually looking at anti-racism is something that needs to happen. The BAME-Ed website also is a great place for looking at some of these resources and exploring these concepts further. Here is an example of one of the resources that they have. It's very useful for staff to use, and also for yourself to use, to really look at and see where you are. Are you in the fear zone? There is no problem with being in that fear zone as long as you're open to moving forward into the learning zone and the growth zones. And this gives you an idea quickly of some of the things that come from being in each of those places, because we do need to be actively anti-racist, and we need to think about what we are doing towards that. So as I've said, we've got to start from the beginning of this. This is a marathon, not a sprint. We can't do it all overnight. The things that we do need to evaluate in our curriculum are what and who are we teaching our pupils about, and why are we teaching this? So it's actually sitting down and stripping bare, looking at your curriculum and saying, okay, why have we got this person in this? Have we done it because it was an example in the national curriculum? They are just examples. We need to think wider than that very, very small group of people that have been chosen. And why are we teaching all these things? Are there other figures that we could and that we should be including? That might involve a couple of twee searches on Google. You might literally have to type in Asian explorers, because we don't know them. If you don't know them, you need to find them. So find those other figures that you should be including, because their stories are amazing, they're inspirational, they're motivational, and they will mean something to your children of that same background. How should this knowledge be introduced so it's of equal importance to other dominant knowledges? Our curriculum is so knowledge heavy, so knowledge heavy. And the reality is we want all this other stuff that is equally as important to be introduced in a way so that it is seen as equally important, not just a bolt on we put on every now and then. Our curriculum is very much knowledge focused and will help children in a pub quiz as they get older. But the reality is we need our children to be thinkers, not just knowledge factories. We need our children to question. We want our children to be inquisitive, to be curious. We want to see that awe and wonder. And the more that we are doing by just packing in more information, we are taking that away. And we need them to be critical thinkers, to analyse what they see around them. We need to think about our social justice in our curriculum. Where is it? Can you see it? And we need to face up to the reality that our curriculum is very inadequate. It does not reflect BAME lives. It also does not reflect social class. Our curriculum does, however, reinforce marginalisations and stereotypes, and we need to stop that. The Black curriculum is another excellent resource. And they wrote a report in January 2020, which is a brilliant read, and I do really recommend that you read it. It is focused on Black British history, but it's very important as a place to start. So it does say, with no mandatory place in a highly Eurocentric national curriculum, Black British history continued to be viewed as insignificant. Now, our current history, the way we teach history, the history that we teach the children, disassociates, as it says here, Britain from a legacy that had oppressed Black people historically. We do give this more romanticised vision, but Britain is amazing, all conquering, as it says here, and internally embracive of ethnic and cultural difference. The truth is that it's not that clear, and we do need to learn more about that history. The contribution of Black and other ethnic minorities is often omitted from our curriculum, which is so wrong, and it should feature in all facets of the curriculum, not just in history, not just in English, where you can look at Black poets and Black authors. It should be everywhere. It should be in geography, it should be in PSHE, it should be in art, it should be in music. The lives of BAME people, BAME communities should be in every facet of our curriculum. The truth is, people are nervous, as I said before, language, people are scared about offending. And also, people don't often know, they don't have the equipment they need to be able to talk about race and racism in a confident manner. We need to arm our teachers with that. And we do need to think a lot more about initial teacher training. And are we thinking about these sorts of things as well? Because there is a difference between being prepared to teach a diverse range of pupils from ethnic groups, but actually teaching cultural diversity and diverse histories. They are two different things, and our teachers are not prepared to teach those. They are not ready to talk about cultural diversity because they do not feel confident in it themselves. Black curriculum makes this point. A central thread of an inclusive curriculum is one that fosters belonging while forging connectivity, rather than making Black, Asian, and other minority ethnic pupils feel like internal immigrants within the British Isles. I really implore you to look at everything you do in school. And even some things that seem really, really simple that you have always done actually make a big difference. And I'm going to take Remembrance Day as an example here. I remember Remembrance Day in school. Every year there is an assembly. When I was head girl at my secondary school, I went down to the local war memorial and was part of the parade, all of those things. And if we sit and you watch memorial programs on television about Remembrance Day, all you see are white soldiers. If you type into Google World War I soldiers, World War II soldiers, you will get pages and pages and pages and pages of white soldiers. The reality is there were soldiers from the West Indies who helped and were part of the British Army. There were Sikh soldiers who were part of the British Army. But where are their stories on our Remembrance Days? Now, as a school, we do make a point of actually showing soldiers from all different ethnic minority backgrounds. And for our children who have that same ethnic background, they sit and they watch and they feel part of it. It's about that connectivity. Their heritage, their background, their families are equally as part of Remembrance Sunday as the white British soldiers. And we need to make sure that we are fostering that, because otherwise something as wonderful and as important as Remembrance Sunday can seem very much like it isn't for some people when it really, really is. So thinking about decolonising the curriculum, the first question to ask is whose viewpoint is the information coming from? It means that they're going to learn a story, but not necessarily the story of the victor. Professor Paul Miller is someone I really recommend that you look at. You follow some of his work. He does a lot of work on decolonising the curriculum, and he really focuses us to the fact that decolonisation moves us from reflection into real consciousness of others. We need to look at all of our things that have been shaped by colonisation. We need to look at classroom layout, routines. We need to decolonise our pedagogy, the way that we are doing things. Decolonising invites us to look for alternatives to create a more equal and inclusive education system. And we've got to encourage our children to question what they are being taught more often. But as I said, before any of this can be done with the children, so much needs to be done with the staff. But it's time to move on and make a change and make some noise. Our children they need to engage critically and reflectively and look at the society in which they live. We've got to, more than ever, focus on empowerment and well-being, especially during this time. And we've got to focus on our understanding of self and of others. We have to collaborate. This is a huge journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's a huge task that will constantly be moving and changing. This is not something we can deal with in one staff meeting and it's done. We need to collaborate, because for as many schools as there are out there that are quite diverse like mine, there are equally schools that have no natural diversity within it. And more work needs to be done in those schools. So collaboration is key. But we have to start with the children. We cannot make assumptions. We need to ask them, get them to open up and to lead the discussion. Their voice is a crucial part of this. It's equally important in those schools, as I've just said, with no natural diversity. They also have thoughts and opinions, and we need to find out what they are. Please let people share their experiences. Open up discussion amongst your staff. Bring it from a place of reality. I've started to tell my staff some stories, and I stand there crying and I sit there and they're crying. But that's the reality. If you want to make this real and you want to make this worthwhile, you need to let people share their experience. We've got to focus on building our homes and our cultural communities. A lot of our BAME families are losing people because of COVID. A lot of our white British families are also losing people because of COVID. We've got to build our home and our cultural communities back again, but we've got to be informed. Everybody here needs to be willing to unlearn and to relearn. There is lots of history that we don't know about, lots of history that we need to relearn. Please do the research. Find out our stories from our families. These are my grandma and my granddad. These are original passport photos. We have their original passports from when they came over. They are Windrush generation, when they came over from the Caribbean to London in the 1950s. Their story is the story of many of our families. We need to hear those stories. And as I said, this is a process of continual change. Too often in our curriculum, we talk about the oppression and the struggle when it comes to Black lives. We need to teach the value, the skills, all those things that are so, so important, and the value that those people have brought to our country. We have to teach that, not just the hardship. But what I'm asking you all to do now, as Tiffany Jewell says in her book, I need you all to use a lens of anti-racism to figure out what you are seeing and to take action. What action are you comfortable taking? What do you feel like you can do? What are you willing to do that goes beyond your comfort zone? And really take heed to these words. You have the capacity to think. You can problem solve and make decisions. You have the power of choice. You are able to pause and reflect. So please take that time now to do so. We have to decolonise and diversify our curriculum as a whole. All other areas, young carers, refugees, our whole community of the UK needs to be reflected in our national curriculum. And the curriculum does give room to more diversity, but it's up to us to exploit it. Because we want to get our children to a point of belonging. And that here is having their voice that is heard. Thank you.